everyone, Amer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm reviewing Season 3, Episode 9, which is called The Play. So Jim gets his instructions by climbing a ladder up to a roof on a building that has a little kids park on a balcony, which is kind of weird. The mission is to stop Milos Kuro, who is a culture minister of the UCR, from continuing his anti-US propaganda that threatens peace talks. We don't have any Willie for this one, and there's no guests either. During the apartment scene, we see a neat piece of Barney gadgetry, which uses radar, so they say, to create a sound envelope, so that only sound through a microphone can be heard if you're sitting in a particular position. We cut to Kuro with his assistant, who are discussing the new play about the current political situation between the two countries. They get a visit from State Department man Barney, who just happens to have 2 tickets for them, and Kuro agrees to check it out. The theater has to close because there's an angry mob demonstrating outside, set up by the IMF. They confront playwright Cinnamon, accusing her of being a traitor, while she, of course, asserts her First Amendment rights. Kuro is fascinated about what he sees as Cinnamon hands out copies of the play for people to read for themselves, and she speaks to Kuro about the situation. Kuro, of course, declares that his country doesn't censor new ideas, so Cinnamon tells him to put the play on in his own country, arranging a private showing at his hotel, with Jim and Rollin playing the roles of the 2 leaders. Kuro is thoroughly impressed, and when Barney protests on behalf of the State Department, it only makes him more adamant to put on the play, using his own country's actors, but the entire group manages to find their way into the UCR. Chauffeur Jim brings Rollin to see one of the actors, Vito Enzor, who initially figures that he's secret police. But Rollin says he's actually David Morgan, a Broadway producer with a lucrative offer for Enzor to come to New York to take part in productions of King Lear for a very handsome price. Enzor still figures that it's a trick to test his loyalty, but Rollin has a check and a passport ready for him to leave the country with Rollin's face. Enzor wants to pack some things, but Rollin says he can't. He needs to leave his old life behind if the escape is going to work. Enzor manages to keep his Medal of Honor with him when Rollin's back is turned, and then heads to the limousine for Jim to take him away. A large table is brought to the theater in the UCR for the planned production, which of course contains a hidden Barney. Once Enzor is away, Rollin starts making an Enzor mask for himself and comes to the theater for rehearsal alongside his rival Usakos. Both of them act as antagonistic prima donnas as expected, with Usakos eventually flipping up the table in anger, and Kuro having to tell Enzor to know his role and shut his mouth. Cinnamon manages to give Barney an opportunity to get out and head up the rafters. At the border, Jim and Enzor are almost clear, but the medal falls out of Enzor's sock, and it's explained away as a gift. A bribe sends them on their way across the border. Barney carefully eludes the guards and their dogs and starts setting up equipment, and rehearsal continues. He's able to maneuver around the balcony passageways and then pulls out the awesome reverse ratchety screwdriver. I was so happy to see this again. Finding a large control box hidden in a case that Rollin brought along, labeled Enzor Makeup, so that he can hear what's going on down at the stage level. Rollin, as Enzor, continues to antagonize Usakos, and Cinnamon says she understands it's difficult for Usakos, who is a renowned actor, to be dealing with the smaller role in the play, which is the last straw for Usakos, who storms off. Cinnamon suggests that Jim, who she says is her husband and accompanied her to the UCR, should play the part, which would be better anyway, as he, of course, is actually American. Kuro grudgingly agrees to try. Rollin and Barney test out the sound envelope and find it's working perfectly. Jim arrives for rehearsal as one of the guard dogs is able to sniff Barney in the room he's hiding in, who quickly turns up the sound to a high frequency to scare the dog away. Jim asks for a short break to study his lines, which Kuro grants, allowing Cinnamon and Rollin as Enzor to visit the premiere and tell him they have apprehension about Kuro's changes, which are very unflattering to the premiere, to say the least, and invite him to come and see for himself. The premiere arrives, and Cinnamon makes sure he's seated in the right place. Barney turns down the sound envelope, and the premiere hears what the IMF wants him to hear about how he squirreled money away and he has a mistress and things like that. The premier confronts Kuro, and Cinnamon switches the scripts on Kuro as he vainly tries to defend himself. Kuro is taken away, and the IMF heads out. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a C-. It's got some good things going for it. There's a really neat use of gadgetry, even if it really is only one piece of gadgetry, that sound envelope. Uh, Too bad that scientifically it's a little bit inaccurate. Barney says it works on radar principles. It's actually sort of sonar principles if you want to stretch it a little bit. But, that's okay. It is an interesting idea. I wonder why they didn't use it more frequently. It probably could be used in other situations, is what I would think. This is a very kind of unique plot. It's not the usual thing that the IMF gets involved with. However, given that at least the story is structured with the idea that this directly involves high level relations between the U.S. and another country, and it's very, very important that this be taken care of. I guess I can kind of see it. It reminds me a little bit of Action in the first season, where the IMF has to get involved with somebody who's putting anti-U.S. propaganda around the world. So it's a little bit iffy there, but okay. What good? Certainly Michael Tolan as Vitol Enzor, and he basically plays a part of Rollin, towards the second half of the episode, is really great. We saw him recently in Trial by Fury, and we'll see him again at least once, I think maybe more than once. And also John Colicos reappears in this one as well, and he's always excellent whenever he shows up. So as far as the guest star performances go, I have no problem with that at all. What I find not so good, though, the comment that I made when I was making notes is, there doesn't seem to be a lot of new ground here in terms of techniques or things that the IMF does, other than the creative use of that sound envelope. Everything else is pretty much the same, and there's really, really nothing to write home about here. The teamwork is good, but kind of it's a little bit all over the place. I don't really feel cohesion with regards to the teamwork, for whatever reason. Everybody is kind of off doing their own thing, and of course they're all involved, but it's really Barney who's doing the key things for the misdirection of what's going on, and it's just not the same thing. I hope what I'm trying to say is coming across. Obviously, Cinnamon is filling a role, and Jim and Rollin are filling roles, but they're just kind of there, sort of just going along for the ride, in a sense. At least that's kind of how I felt. One big flaw I find in this episode, which is why I give it a grade of a C-, is that we really kind of know the payoff beforehand. Right from when we see the apartment scene, we know what the IMF is going to do. And I think that kind of dovetails into what I was saying about teamwork. A lot of this is just putting the mark through the steps that they have kind of predetermined and say, okay, well, we're just going to do this, do this, do this, do this. And then at the end, it all hinges on the premiere just taking a seat. And the rest of it is kind of window dressing around that. So, while like I said, it's unique and I don't have a problem with the way that the plot kind of unfolded, it's just missing that kind of oomph, especially when we do know beforehand what the IMF is going to try and do. So that's my review for this one. Thank you as always for watching. Please like this episode. Please subscribe to my channel. And please leave your comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.